The freezing winds cut across Carter's exposed skin as he stumbled forward, each step a battle against the biting cold and the weight of his own broken body. His breath came in ragged gasps, clouding the night air in front of him. His uniform was torn, blood crusted at his side where sharp alien rock had torn through him during the last assault. Around him, nothing but endless wasteland stretched out, jagged stones rising like broken teeth against the darkened sky. The battlefield was silent now. His unit, his comrades, gone, scattered, lost to the chaos of an ambush they hadn't even seen coming. Carter wasn't supposed to be here. They told him evacuation was impossible. They told him to find cover, survive if he could. But out here, miles from any extraction point, survival seemed like nothing more than a cruel joke whispered by men who didn't know the smell of their own blood. Every muscle in Carter's body screamed for him to stop, to lie down and let the cold take him. He thought of it, even welcomed it for a heartbeat. A warm bed. A familiar laugh. His daughter's face, freckles, messy hair, that stubborn glint of determination she'd gotten from her old man. He could almost hear her voice calling him home. The memory kept his legs moving. Left, right, drag, stumble. He had no direction anymore, just a primal urge to move. That was when he heard it, faint, almost lost to the howling winds. A cry, high and broken, carried on the air like the voice of a ghost. Instinct told him to turn back, to ignore it. Military training screamed at him, unidentified sound, possible trap, enemy territory. But something deeper, something older, overrode that fear. Maybe it was the same stubbornness that had kept him alive this long. Maybe it was something else entirely. He forced himself toward the sound, hands trembling as he pulled his sidearm free, moving cautiously over the uneven ground. The ruins rose before him, crumbling structures of alien origin, twisted spires and half-collapsed domes illuminated only by the ghostly glow of distant fires. Somewhere within that broken maze something, was crying. Carter found her beneath a shattered archway, pinned under a heavy slab of debris. She was small, delicate-looking, her skin a pale blue that shimmered faintly in the darkness. Wide, luminous eyes stared up at him, full of terror and pain. She wasn't human. She wasn't even close. But she was hurt, helpless, and bleeding out onto the dust-choked ground. Her hands clawed weakly at the rubble, a soft, desperate whimper escaping her lips. For a moment he froze. Training took over, assess, categorize, decide. Alien species. Unknown threat level. Injured. Alone. His thumb hovered over the safety of his pistol. He could walk away. It wasn't his war. It wasn't his responsibility. He could leave her here, let the wilderness finish what the battle had started. No one would know. No one would judge him. But he would. With a grunt of effort, Carter shoved the pistol back into its holster and dropped to his knees beside her. Pain lanced through his side, making him grit his teeth, but he forced his hands under the edge of the slab, bracing his legs against the ground. He counted to 3 under his breath, and heaved upward with every ounce of strength he had left. The slab shifted, then slid away with a grinding shriek of stone against stone. The alien girl cried out in pain, curling into herself instinctively. Carter reached for her, carefully lifting her into his arms. Her body was lighter than he expected, fragile, bones delicate beneath her skin. She shivered violently, her breathing shallow and rapid. Blood, or something like it, stained the side of her head, matted in her hair. He pulled a pressure bandage from his kit, applying it with slow, careful hands. She flinched away from his touch at first, but he murmured softly to her, nonsense words, soothing noises. After a few moments she went still, watching him with wide, fearful eyes. As he worked, she whispered something in a voice so faint he almost didn't hear it. The words meant nothing to him, but the tone was unmistakable, confusion, disbelief. She didn't understand why he was helping her. Maybe neither did he. Maybe it didn't matter. "You're gonna be all right, kid," he muttered, not sure if she understood. "Just hang on." He had no idea how he was going to get them both out of here. His own strength was failing. His vision swam every few seconds. But looking down at her, at the way she clung to life, trembling but refusing to let go, he knew he couldn't give up. He wouldn't. Not while there was still breath in his body. The ground rumbled beneath them, a deep, distant growl like the belly of the world itself shifting. Carter looked up, scanning the horizon. Shadows moved among the ruins, hulking forms that didn't belong to any species he recognized. Predators. Scavengers. The kind that hunted the weak, the wounded. The kind that smelled blood and fear. Carter tightened his grip around the alien girl, feeling her tiny frame tense against him. She understood the danger, even if she didn't know the specifics. Slowly, painfully, he got to his feet, cradling her against his chest. He staggered forward, each step a monumental effort, driven now by something bigger than survival. Duty. Compassion. Humanity. Whatever name it bore, it burned in him stronger than any fear. He thought again of his daughter back home, of the promises he made to her. To always fight for what was right. To protect those who couldn't protect themselves. He wasn't about to break that promise now, no matter how far from home he was, no matter how impossible the odds. Behind him, the shadows moved closer. He didn't look back. He just kept walking, carrying the life he had chosen to save, the one bright spark in a world gone dark. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the pain and exhaustion and fear, he felt something like hope stir to life again. The cold was sharper now, gnawing at Carter's bones as he trudged forward, every step a battle against the exhaustion crushing him. The alien girl clung to his chest, her breathing shallow but steady. Carter knew he was running out of time. His injuries were worse than he let himself believe. The wound at his side burned with a growing heat that spoke of infection. If he didn't find shelter or help soon, either of them would see another sunrise. The ruins ahead offered little comfort. Jagged metal beams and crumbled stone twisted into grotesque shapes by past battles, broken remnants of a world long abandoned. Carter kept moving, weaving through the wreckage, ears straining for any sound of pursuit. The predators were still out there. He could feel their hunger like a pressure against the back of his neck. Every instinct screamed at him to move faster, but his body betrayed him with each dragging step. A faint flicker of light caught his eye, not the wild, untamed glow of fire, but the steady pulse of something artificial, something built. His heart kicked against his ribs. It could be a trap, sure, but it could also be salvation. He shifted the girl slightly in his arms, whispering reassurances he wasn't sure she understood, and headed toward the light. The structure was barely standing, a battered transport vehicle, half buried under rubble, its emergency beacon still stubbornly blinking. Carter stumbled to it, forcing the door open with a grunt of effort. The inside was cramped and cold, but it was shelter. It was safety for now. He laid the girl down as gently as he could, grabbing a thermal blanket from the emergency kit and wrapping it around her small frame. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy with fever, and she reached out weakly, her fingers brushing his blood-stained uniform. He caught her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Her skin was unnaturally cool, but the gesture seemed to calm her. She whispered again, voice cracking, speaking words he still didn't understand. Carter wished he could tell her she was safe now. Wished he could tell her that everything would be okay. But lies tasted foul on his tongue, and he had too much respect for her fight to offer anything but the truth. "I'll get you out of here," he promised, voice hoarse with cold and pain. "I swear it." Movement outside snapped his head up. Shadows flitting through the ruins, quick and silent. The scavengers hadn't given up. If anything, they were getting bolder. Carter checked his weapon, 1 magazine left, maybe a dozen rounds if he was lucky. Not nearly enough. He couldn't fight them off forever, not in his condition, not while protecting the girl. He needed a plan. Fast. The transport systems were mostly dead, but the beacon was active. He could boost the signal, maybe even trigger a distress call strong enough to be picked up by a patrol. If there was anyone left listening. He set to work, fingers clumsy with cold, rerouting circuits and jamming wires together. Sparks flew, and for a terrifying moment he thought he'd killed the whole system. Then the beacon's pulse grew stronger, its frequency shifting into the emergency distress band used by human forces. Now it was a waiting game. Carter slumped against the wall, his strength bleeding out with every passing second. The girl whimpered softly, reaching for him. He crawled back to her side, gathering her into his arms once more. She needed the warmth, the comfort. So did he. The minutes dragged by, each one a lifetime. The scavengers circled the transport, testing its defenses, sniffing out their prey. Carter kept his weapon ready, listening, waiting, every muscle coiled like a spring. He could hold them off for a while, maybe scare them back, but not forever. Eventually, they would get bold enough to rush him. The girl stirred, her small hands clutching his jacket. She spoke again, her voice stronger this time, words strange and musical. Carter wished he could understand. He wanted to tell her he was sorry. Sorry for the war. Sorry for the hatred. Sorry for the endless cycles of violence that always seemed to end the same way, with the innocent bleeding out in forgotten places. A low growl sounded just outside the broken transport. Carter tensed, raising his pistol. The first scavenger came into view, tall, gaunt, its skin stretched tight over skeletal limbs, eyes glowing with predatory hunger. It snarled, testing the air, then took a cautious step forward. Carter fired a warning shot, the crack of the gun shattering the silence. The creature flinched but didn't retreat. More shadows shifted behind it, gathering, waiting. They knew he was weak. They could smell the blood, the fear. It was only a matter of time. The beacon's pulse grew louder, filling the tiny space with an urgent thrum. Carter prayed someone, anyone, was out there listening. His grip tightened on the pistol as the scavengers advanced, slow and sure, their movements coordinated, intelligent. His heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear anything else. Then, a new sound. Distant, at first, but growing rapidly. The high-pitched whine of engines. Carter's breath caught in his throat. He strained his ears, desperate to believe. The scavengers hesitated, ears twitching toward the sky. Carter risked a glance upward through a crack in the transport's roof. A ship, human markings, low-flying, searchlights stabbing through the dark, roared overhead. Relief crashed over him so hard he nearly dropped the pistol. He fired 2 quick shots into the air, flares of light in the night. The ship wheeled around, engines screaming, heading straight for him. The scavengers bolted, melting back into the shadows, their courage broken. Carter sagged against the wall, the adrenaline draining from him in an instant. He tightened his arms around the alien girl, feeling the fragile rise and fall of her chest against his own. He closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself the smallest measure of hope. They weren't safe yet, but help was coming. They had survived the night. Together. And somehow, in the frozen wasteland of a dead world, that felt like a victory worth bleeding for. The medics worked quickly once they pulled Carter and the girl aboard. Their hands were efficient, but Carter barely registered the sensation of being treated. His gaze never left her, the small alien whose life had somehow become entwined with his own. They spoke to him, asked questions, tried to pull him away, but he held fast, refusing to let her hands slip from his. His mind was a haze of pain and exhaustion, but one thing remained sharp and solid: she had trusted him when she had every reason to fear. The ship vibrated as it broke free from the ruined planet's atmosphere. Carter tried to piece together their conversation, but the words blurred into noise. His body wanted to shut down, to finally surrender, but a stubborn part of him kept fighting, anchored to the silent promise he had made. When the medics finally separated them to treat his wounds more thoroughly, panic clawed at him. Only when one of them placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder and gestured toward her, resting now, her breathing steady, did Carter allow himself to breathe. Hours bled into each other. Carter drifted in and out of consciousness as they traveled. He caught snippets of worried conversations. Words like contamination, unidentified species, and chain of command. The tone was always the same: suspicion and fear, the human response to anything not understood. Carter wanted to shout at them, wanted to tell them she wasn't a threat, that she wasn't like the others. But his voice wouldn't cooperate. His body remained a prison he could only rage against in silence. The ship finally docked at a remote human outpost, isolated from the larger colonies. Carter was placed under quarantine, a precaution he understood but resented all the same. From his small observation room, he could see the girl, separated by layers of reinforced glass, surrounded by scientists in white coats who treated her like a specimen rather than a person. He watched helplessly as they poked and prodded, their expressions a mixture of fascination and revulsion. Every time she looked toward him, Carter pressed his hand against the glass, offering what little comfort he could from a distance. Days passed. Carter recovered slowly, his body healing but his frustration festering. He asked, demanded, to see her properly, but his requests were denied at every turn. Too dangerous, too risky, too unknown. Protocol over compassion, procedure over humanity. It gnawed at him. She had clung to life because he had promised safety, and now he was forced to stand by while the people he had trusted violated that promise. Late one night, as Carter lay awake staring at the sterile ceiling, the base alarms sounded. A breach. Security forces scrambled, boots thundering down the hallways. Carter sat up, heart pounding, instincts roaring back to life. Moments later, the door to his room hissed open, and there she stood, frail and shaking but very much alive, her wide, luminous eyes locked onto his. Without thinking, Carter crossed the room, pulling her into a careful embrace. She murmured words he still didn't understand, but their meaning was clear enough. Relief, gratitude, fear. She had escaped. Somehow, despite her weakness, despite the odds, she had found her way back to him. It hit Carter then, like a blow to the chest. He wasn't just her protector. He was her only family now. Shouts echoed down the corridor. They were searching for her. Carter didn't hesitate. He scooped her up, ignoring the protests of his still healing injuries, and moved. He knew the layout of these outposts, knew the blind spots and hidden maintenance shafts from years of service. It was a desperate gamble, but staying meant surrender. And he had already promised her something better. Through back halls and forgotten service tunnels, Carter carried her toward freedom. Every step was agony, but he welcomed the pain. It kept him sharp, kept him moving. The girl clung to him, trusting him completely, and he would not betray that trust. Not now. Not ever. They reached the outer perimeter just as searchlights flared to life. Carter ducked into the shadows, heart hammering, brain racing. Escape was almost impossible, but impossibility had never stopped humanity before. He scanned the compound's edge, spotting an old emergency vehicle, dusty and forgotten. It was a long shot, but it might be enough. Moving low and fast, Carter made his way to the vehicle, praying it still had power. He placed her gently inside, strapping her in as best he could, then hotwired the ignition with trembling hands. The engine coughed, sputtered, and roared to life. Alarms shrieked. Guards shouted. Carter threw the vehicle into gear and slammed the accelerator down, tires screaming against the pavement. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets sparking against the metal chassis. Carter hunched over the wheel, weaving and dodging, every nerve alive with adrenaline. The girl clutched the seat, wide-eyed but silent, trusting him to get them out. The outer gates loomed ahead. Locked, fortified. No time for subtlety. Carter gunned the engine, aiming straight for them. Impact jarred every bone in his body as the vehicle smashed through the barriers, metal bending and glass shattering. But they were through. They were free. Dust and night swallowed them up as Carter sped into the wasteland beyond the outpost. He didn't dare slow down until the lights of the compound were distant stars behind them. Only then did he ease off the accelerator, his hands trembling violently. The girl reached out, resting her small hand over his. Carter glanced at her, meeting her gaze, and for the first time he saw something he hadn't expected: hope. Raw and fragile, but burning bright. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something bigger. Something worth fighting for. Without speaking, Carter made a silent vow. Whatever came next, whatever battles they faced, they would face them together. Humanity had its flaws, suspicion, fear, cruelty, but it also had its strengths, loyalty, compassion, resilience. He would show her the best of them. And in doing so, maybe, just maybe, he would save himself too. The wasteland stretched endlessly ahead, broken only by jagged rocks and the occasional dead tree. Carter kept driving until the vehicle finally sputtered, coughed, and died, the engine exhausted from their desperate escape. Silence fell over the desert. He climbed out, scanning the horizon, the vast loneliness pressing down on him. They had put miles between themselves and the outpost, but it wouldn't be enough. Not for long. Humans did not let go of what they feared. They would come. He needed a plan. The girl remained seated, watching him with a calmness that seemed almost unnatural. Carter approached slowly, crouching down beside her. He knew words would fail here, but he had to try. He pointed to the sky, made motions of traveling far, of safety somewhere beyond this barren place. She nodded, understanding more than he could explain. There was no time to waste. Carter gathered supplies from the vehicle, a small canteen, a tattered emergency kit, a worn map. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. They moved under cover of darkness, slipping through the rocky landscape with quiet determination. Every step was a struggle against exhaustion, against the burning ache in Carter's muscles, but he refused to stop. The girl followed close, her small form shadowing his every move. There was a rhythm to it, an unspoken bond that had formed between them. Every time he faltered, she was there, a reminder that he wasn't just running for himself anymore. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and gold, Carter spotted a cluster of abandoned structures in the distance. He led them there, finding shelter inside the crumbling remains of what had once been a mining outpost. They collapsed into the shadows, hidden for the moment from prying eyes. Carter used what little he had to treat their wounds and ration their supplies. The girl sat silently, watching him with an intensity that was almost unsettling. She seemed to study every movement, every decision, as if memorizing it. He offered her a sip of water, and she accepted it with a small, grateful nod. It wasn't enough, but it would have to do. They rested for a few hours, but Carter's mind remained restless. He knew he couldn't stay in one place long. If the outpost had reported the breach, and they would have, then patrols would be sweeping the area soon. He needed to find a way to reach one of the larger colonies, places where human presence was thicker, where they could disappear into the chaos of the crowd. It was risky, but it was the only chance they had. He mapped out a route, using the stars and the faded lines on the emergency map. It would take days on foot, maybe longer given their condition. But Carter had faced worse odds before. And this time, he had something to fight for that was greater than survival. He had a promise to keep. As they prepared to move again, the girl reached into the folds of her ragged clothing and produced something, a small, crystalline device that pulsed faintly with inner light. She held it out to Carter, her expression solemn. He hesitated, then took it carefully, feeling a strange warmth seep into his fingers. The device thrummed with power, ancient and alien. It wasn't a weapon. It was something else. A key, perhaps. A message. A link between her world and his. Carter tucked it away safely. He didn't understand it, but he understood her trust. That was enough. They set out once more, moving quickly and carefully across the barren land. Hours blurred into each other. Carter lost track of time, measuring the passage of days only by the rising and setting sun. The girl never complained, never faltered. She moved with a determination that belied her frail appearance, driven by the same silent hope that burned inside Carter. At night, when the cold gnawed at their bones, Carter told her stories in hushed whispers. Tales of Earth, of cities that touched the sky and oceans that stretched beyond the horizon. She listened with wide, wondering eyes, clinging to every word. In those moments, Carter felt the old pride stirring in his chest, the pride of being human, of belonging to a race that had dreamed beyond the stars, that had dared to reach for the impossible. But the shadows never stayed far behind. One night, as they huddled beneath a broken rock formation, Carter spotted the distant shimmer of searchlights sweeping the horizon. His heart sank. They were closing in. He shook the girl awake, and they moved, faster now, abandoning caution for speed. They ran through the night, the harsh terrain tearing at their feet, lungs burning with every breath. Carter could hear the whine of engines now, the sharp bark of orders over loudspeakers. Panic clawed at the edges of his mind, but he shoved it down. Fear would not save them. Only resolve would. As they crested a ridge, Carter spotted Salvation, a derelict freight vessel, half buried in the sands. If he could reach it, if he could coax it back to life, they might escape this nightmare. He pulled the girl along, both of them stumbling and gasping. The searchlights grew brighter, nearer. Time was slipping away. They reached the ship just as the first patrols crested the opposite hill. Carter tore into the maintenance hatch, ripping panels away, his fingers bleeding from the effort. The girl pressed against him, her tiny body trembling. He whispered reassurances he wasn't sure he believed, willing the ancient vessel to cooperate. The engine sputtered once, twice, then roared weakly to life. Carter whooped in triumph, hauling the girl inside. He slammed the hatch shut as gunfire rattled against the hull. Alarms blared. Systems overloaded. But the ship lifted, groaning in protest, and carried them up into the sky, away from the soldiers below. As the ground fell away, Carter slumped into the pilot's chair, exhaustion threatening to drag him under. The girl curled beside him, her small hand wrapped tightly around his. They had escaped. Barely. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. He set a course for the nearest neutral zone, somewhere beyond the reach of fearful human hands. Somewhere they could build a life from the ashes of all they had lost. He glanced down at her, at the hope etched into every line of her fragile face, and made another silent vow. Whatever waited for them out there, whatever dangers, whatever horrors, he would face it all. For her. For the promise he had made. For the fragile, indomitable spark of something new, something better, born from the ashes of fear and hate. And maybe, just maybe, he would find redemption along the way. The ship shuddered under Carter's hands, its systems strained to their limits, but it held together long enough to breach the atmosphere. He plotted a course into the dense asteroid belt that ringed the outer edges of the neutral zones, knowing it would give them cover from any pursuing forces. His fingers danced across the controls with grim precision, coaxing every bit of speed from the battered engines. The girl remained silent beside him, her wide eyes locked on the void outside. Despite everything, she trusted him without question. That trust weighed heavier on Carter than the endless expanse of stars before them. They drifted among the asteroids for days, repairing what they could, rationing supplies to the barest minimum. Carter taught her how to adjust the life support systems, how to read the most basic navigational charts. She learned quickly, adapting with an instinct that bordered on uncanny. It was in those quiet hours, patching broken circuits and rerouting power conduits, that Carter realized how much had changed. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was becoming something more. And so was he. The moment of peace shattered without warning. A transmission crackled through the static, an emergency frequency on loop. Carter listened, dread pooling in his gut. A bounty. His face, his name, and a price tag large enough to make any half-starved scavenger take notice. He knew it would happen eventually. Humans feared what they didn't understand. They had always reacted with violence when something challenged their fragile control. Carter wasn't surprised. He was just tired. Tired of fighting for scraps of decency in a galaxy that had forgotten what it meant to protect the innocent. He muted the transmission and turned to the girl. Her gaze held no fear, only sadness, as if she understood the weight now pressing on his shoulders. He crouched before her, searching for the right words, but she spoke first. Not in perfect English, but close enough to leave him stunned. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice raw and halting. "Now, take what is yours." Carter stared at her, heart hammering. She reached for the crystalline device again, cradling it like something sacred. It pulsed with a soft, golden light, filling the cramped cockpit with a warmth that defied the cold machinery surrounding them. She pressed it into his hands, her touch gentle but insistent. He didn't understand. Not fully. But in that moment, he knew refusal would dishonor everything they had fought to survive. He accepted it, feeling the hum of something ancient, something vast, flowing through his skin and into his very bones. Images flickered across his mind, worlds untouched by war, cities crafted from light and song, histories spanning eons carried in the memory of her people. She was giving him more than a gift. She was giving him a legacy. Before Carter could respond, the ship's warning system screamed. A hunter ship, sleek and deadly, had found them. There would be no outrunning it this time. He spun into action, locking the girl into the emergency pod and sealing it with a wordless promise. She pounded on the glass, tears streaking her face, but he only smiled, the kind of smile that comes when a man has made peace with the road ahead. He launched the pod into the dense field of asteroids, praying it would go unnoticed amidst the chaos. Then he turned the battered vessel toward the hunter. No intention of running now. Only defiance. Only one last stand. The ship groaned around him, alarms blaring, as he rammed the engines to full throttle, hurling the freighter into a suicidal charge. For a moment, the stars blurred around him, the vastness of space folding inward, and he thought he saw Earth, blue and bright and impossibly far away. A memory or a promise, he didn't know. The collision tore through the hunter's hull, ripping it apart in a flash of fire and twisted metal. Carter felt the shockwave tear through him, a final exhale into the void. But he wasn't afraid. He had chosen this. He had chosen to protect something pure, something precious, even at the cost of his own life. The emergency pod tumbled through the debris field, unseen, untouched. Inside, the girl clutched the crystalline device to her chest, silent tears falling as she watched the wreckage drift away. She felt him go, like a candle extinguished in a storm. But with the grief came something else, a burning, relentless determination. His sacrifice would not be in vain. Months passed. She found refuge in the hidden corners of the neutral zones, learned to blend, to survive. She used the device sparingly, unlocking its secrets bit by bit. It held knowledge, technology beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed. But she kept it hidden, protected, waiting for the right moment. Because she understood now what Carter had given her. A second chance. A new beginning. Word of Carter's death spread through the underground channels like wildfire. Some called him a fool, a deserter. Others whispered his name with reverence, a ghostly legend born from the ashes of fear. They said he had traded his life for something no bounty could ever match. Hope. Years later, when the tides of fear and hatred finally began to turn, when humanity looked up and saw the stars not as threats but as promises, it was his story that lit the way. The girl, no longer a frightened survivor but a leader, a symbol, carried his legacy forward. She taught them about trust, about sacrifice, about the fragile, fierce beauty of choosing love over fear. And on a quiet, unremarkable world far from the battlegrounds of old, she built a memorial. No grand statues, no speeches. Just a small stone, half buried in the sand, bearing words carved in a hand that still trembled with the weight of memory. You saved my life, human. And I will spend the rest of mine proving you were right to believe in me. The winds of the barren world carried her promise into the endless night, and somewhere, in the unseen currents of the stars, Carter's spirit smiled, not as a soldier, not as a fugitive, but as the man who had dared to save a life, and in doing so, changed the fate of two worlds forever.